The story begins with a young man named Martín, an amateur historian with a passion for the paranormal. Martín finds himself in an antique shop in a remote town, a place he had always dreamed of visiting for its mystery. There, among the darker pieces, he discovers an old mirror with an intricately carved wooden frame that emits a strange vibration in its presence. The shop owner, an elderly man named Elias, warns Martín about the mirror. However, his curiosity leads him to purchase it, despite feeling a slight chill as he gazes into its reflection. Elias mentions that it has been passed down through generations and has brought misfortune to all who have owned it. Martín brings the mirror to his home, an old mansion inherited from his family. From the moment he places a mirror in his living room, strange occurrences begin. Flickering lights, unexplained noises, and a constant sense of being watched. The first night after placing it, he sees a distorted reflection of himself, but it's not him. At first, he believes he's tired or hallucinating, but upon waking the next morning, he notices something has changed in the mirror. The shadows within the glass seem deeper. Martín decides to investigate more about the mirror and discovers that this object has a tragic history. It was created in the 18th century by an alchemist obsessed with immortality, a man named Amedeo Corvini. It is rumored that the mirror was designed to trap the soul of anyone who reflected in it, and all those who have possessed it have been consumed by their own reflection, condemned to an existence within the mirror. The mirror not only reflects, but it distorts reality, trapping people in a parallel dimension that connects with their deepest fears. With each passing day, Martín begins to feel as if something is constantly watching him, and the images in the mirror grow more vivid and terrifying. Martín starts suffering from constant nightmares. In them, the mirror calls his name, showing him shadowy figures and whispering voices. The reflections of people he knows begin to crumble, revealing their worst secrets and repressed desires. It's as if the mirror can see into his soul. As his obsession with the object grows, his behavior becomes erratic. His face begins to reflect an empty expression, as if his identity is fading. One particularly unsettling night, Martín sees himself in the mirror, but he cannot move, as if his reflection is controlled by an unknown force. When he tries to touch the mirror, his fingers sink into the glass and a cold, desperate feeling consumes him. Martín finds an old journal among his family's belongings, revealing more about the history of the mirror. It details how his great-grandfather tried to destroy the mirror multiple times, but each attempt was in vain. As his efforts increased, so did the mirror's power, until finally, when he looked into it one last time, he vanished without a trace, as if his soul had been absorbed by the glass. In that moment, Martín realizes that the connection between the mirror and his family is deeper and more personal than he had imagined. Martín begins to understand that the mirror hasn't just been a cursed object, but is tied to his own existence, as if his soul were predestined to join that of his lost ancestor. Terrified, he starts seeing fragments of his great-grandfather reflected in the mirror, as if the man were struggling to emerge from the other side. Every time Martín gets closer to the mirror, the figure of his great-grandfather becomes clearer. He calls his name, begging to be freed from his eternal prison. However, Martín also feels an increasing attraction to the mirror, as if his ancestor's shadow is taking control of him, seeking revenge for his imprisonment and dragging Martín into a spiral of despair. Things grow even more complicated when Martín notices that his face in the reflection begins to change. His body is aging rapidly. His eyes darken, and an inexplicable force pushes him closer and closer to the mirror. The environment around him becomes increasingly darker, with a thick fog surrounding his house, as if the mirror were altering reality itself. His friends and family begin to worry about his behavior, but when they try to confront him, they are repelled by a strange energy emanating from the mirror. In his desperate search to understand the truth, Martín meets an elderly occultist who reveals the final, most horrifying secret about the mirror. It is a door, a threshold between the real world and a dark realm where the souls of the victims are condemned to live in a parallel dimension. Amedeo Corvini, The creator of the mirror didn't just trap souls, but also sought a way to dominate that dimension and, through it, achieve immortality. Every soul the mirror absorbs strengthens its power, and once it reaches a certain point, the mirror could transcend the boundaries of its own universe and consume reality itself. The occultist warns that the only way to destroy the mirror is to break the connection between it and the soul trapped inside. But doing so would require a terrible sacrifice. The soul of the one marked by the mirror, Martín, now closer than ever to being consumed, faces the terrifying decision of destroying the mirror and, in doing so, sacrificing his own life, or finding a way to escape the curse. Martín, aware of the growing influence the mirror has over him, decides to confront the darkness that has begun to dominate his mind. Facing his own fears and the voices calling him from the reflection, he enters an internal battle where his will is tested. At that moment, the figure of his great-grandfather appears in the mirror, his face distorted by despair, but also by a kind of longing for release. Martín knows that only by confronting the shadow of his past can he free himself, but in doing so, he is dragged into the same dimension as the mirror. The real world begins to crumble as he crosses the thin line between the two worlds. Inside the mirror, he encounters distorted versions of his own life. Moments of regret, wrong decisions, and memories intertwining with those of his great-grandfather, who watches him from the shadows. Martín eventually discovers that the mirror doesn't just reflect trapped souls, but also manipulates memories and emotions, creating a mental prison that never allows true liberation. The souls trapped within the mirror live in a temporal distortion, condemned to relive their worst moments over and over again. Over time, Martín realizes that the only way to break the curse is to free all the souls trapped within, including those responsible for creating the mirror's evil. In a final act of bravery and desperation, he decides to destroy the mirror once and for all, but he knows the price he will pay will be high. In a final sacrifice, Martín manages to destroy the mirror. However, the destruction of the object causes a release that not only drags a soul, but also that of his great-grandfather, now trapped in the same dimension the mirror had created. In the final moment before disappearing, Martín manages to see, through a blinding glow, how the trapped souls are freed, and with them, the darkness that had surrounded his home. But when witnesses arrive at the house, they find only a broken piece of mirror on the floor, reflecting only nothingness. The story of Martín and his battle against the mirror's curse becomes a rumor, an echo of what once occurred.